Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, the place where silence speaks louder than betrayal. It started with the bathroom door. Not slamming, just closing. Quietly. Every evening. Locked. She'd stay in there for an hour. Sometimes two. No shower running. Just silence, and the faint clicking of a phone keyboard. I'd sit on the other side like a forgotten object, listening to nothing and imagining everything. 3 weeks earlier, she had told me to give her space. I did. I gave her the bedroom, the remote, the Spotify account. Even the dog started sleeping on her side of the bed. I became a background hum. Useful, silent, safe. She began dressing differently. Crop tops with cardigans she never used to wear. She started wearing lipstick to the grocery store and spraying perfume at 10 p.m. to walk the dog. The same dog that had arthritis and hated the cold. She started sleeping with her phone under the pillow. One night, I went to reach for her hand in bed, not even to hold it, just to feel human, and she flinched like I was the ghost of someone she used to know. That hurt more than any affair ever could. And I didn't even know yet if there was one. But I was already being replaced. By someone funnier, smarter, probably better at making coffee. Someone who didn't ask, "Are you okay?" every day like it was a broken record. Someone who wasn't always tiptoeing around hoping not to be another reason she sighed. That morning, she didn't say good morning. She didn't say anything. She just poured coffee for herself, grabbed her keys, and left. No look back. Not even a nod. I sat there staring at her half-full cup from yesterday. And then I did something strange. I packed my bag. Not out of anger. Not out of courage. Out of pure, exhausted nothingness. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just disappeared. And she didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Not ever. The silence that followed my disappearance wasn't sharp. It was soft. Almost comfortable. Like the world exhaled for me because I never had the guts to do it myself. I spent the first night at an old motel 2 towns over. The kind that still gives you a physical key and smells faintly like forgotten cigarettes. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd do when she saw my things were gone. My toothbrush. My shoes. The photo of us from our first hike. Gone. I imagined panic. Tears. Maybe even guilt. But the truth hit differently. She didn't even call. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not after work. I refreshed my phone like a lunatic. Nothing. I even texted myself from a fake number just to see if my notifications were working. They were. She just wasn't using them. I told myself maybe she thought I'd come back. That this was just another one of my quiet tantrums, like when I used to sleep on the couch hoping she'd follow me out and ask what was wrong. She never did then either. By the third day, I broke. I drove back, not to see her, but to see the house. To see if anything had changed. My hands were shaking the whole ride like I was headed into enemy territory. But when I parked down the street and looked through our front window, I froze. There she was, on the couch, with a guy. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he looked comfortable. Way too comfortable. Her feet were in his lap. She was laughing. Not texting. Not sighing. Laughing. Like the version of her I hadn't seen in months had returned for someone else. And that's when something inside me broke, not in a dramatic way, but like a final thread snapping. I wasn't even angry. I was embarrassed. Humiliated that I'd been hoping she'd miss me, while she'd already moved on. Maybe not physically, maybe not officially, but emotionally. She was gone long before I packed my bag. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront her. I just sat there in my car, invisible, watching my own life play out like a show I hadn't been cast in. The worst part wasn't that she'd found someone new. It was realizing she hadn't even noticed I was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on the stiff motel bed again, phone on my chest, eyes wide open, and head spinning with 1,000 silent questions that would never get answers. I kept replaying that moment on the couch, the angle of her smile, the way she leaned into him like she belonged there. I was no longer the man she reached for. I wasn't even the man she looked for when something went wrong. I was just gone, and not missed. On day 4, I stopped waiting for a call. I turned my phone off. What was the point of checking if she had nothing to say? Instead, I wandered. I ended up at a bookstore I hadn't visited in years. Sat in the corner and pretended to read. But really, I was watching couples. Noticing how some still touched shoulders when they laughed or whispered dumb jokes. That used to be us. Now it felt like fiction. That's when I heard my name. Albin. I looked up. It was Margot, Cassidy's cousin. We hadn't spoken in forever, Not since that awkward Thanksgiving where she drunkenly told me I was too tender for someone like Cassidy. At the time, I thought it was an insult. Now I wondered if it had been a warning. She sat beside me without asking and just looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I figured something happened. Cassidy's been different." I froze. Did she know? Margot continued. "She talks about this guy from her gym a lot. Always when she thinks no one's listening." I didn't want to believe it, but the way she says his name, she trailed off. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't want to know. What mattered more was hearing someone else finally acknowledge it, that I wasn't crazy or clingy or overly sensitive. I'd spent months gaslighting myself into silence, blaming myself for her distance. Like maybe if I had been louder, more exciting, more masculine, she would have stayed. But now I saw it clearly. Cassidy had been leaving me for a long time. She just hadn't bothered to tell me. I left the bookstore without buying anything, but I left with something else, resolve. I wouldn't confront her. That would give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. No, if she wanted life without me, she'd get it. Completely. Quietly. But this time, I wouldn't just vanish. I'd leave something behind that made her realize exactly what she threw away. I spent the next day writing something I never intended to send. It started out as a goodbye, then turned into a confession, then a full-blown autopsy of our marriage. Every moment I had shrunk myself to keep her comfortable. Every time I'd swallowed my pride to avoid a fight. Every quiet ache I ignored while she smiled at her phone like it was her secret diary. I wasn't trying to hurt her with it. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. And in that exhaustion, the truth poured out of me like it had been waiting for years. When I finished, I folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. On the front, I wrote her name, nothing else. I drove back to the house. Yes, our house. But I didn't go to the door. I slipped the envelope through the mail slot, turned around, and got back into my car without even looking at the windows. I didn't care if she saw me. She had already stopped seeing me a long time ago. I drove until sunset, no destination in mind, no music playing, just the soft hum of the engine and the letter's words echoing in my head. You didn't have to cheat to make me feel replaced. You just had to stop looking at me. That was the line that stung the most. Because it was true. By evening, I was hours away from home. I checked into another motel, this one near a lake I remembered from a school trip decades ago. I walked down to the water, barefoot, and just stared. The surface was so still it looked like glass. It reminded me of Cassidy's silence, calm on top, but cold and endless beneath. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. It was her. 3 words. Did you leave? Not where are you? Not are you okay? Just a sterile question, as if I'd lost my keys, not my place in her life. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The letter would speak louder than I ever could. She would read it. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd roll her eyes and toss it. Either way, it wouldn't matter. Because something had finally shifted in me. I no longer wanted her to miss me. I wanted her to remember me. Every time the silence got too loud. The next morning, I didn't even reach for my phone. I opened the motel curtains, watched the mist curl across the lake like smoke from a dying fire, and for the first time in months, I felt something strange, peace. Not happiness, not closure, but a kind of numb stillness that felt better than the hollow ache I'd been carrying. I sat there in silence for a long time. Then the phone started ringing. First once, then again, then again. Cassidy. I watched the screen light up with her name, each time imagining her in our kitchen, finally discovering the letter and not knowing what to do with it. Was she pacing? Crying? Furious? Or had she only called because her reputation was now in danger? Maybe she just wanted to know how much I knew. Maybe it had nothing to do with me at all. I let all 8 calls ring until they stopped. She didn't leave a voicemail. She never liked using her voice for hard things. By early afternoon, I finally checked her messages. There were 3. Can we talk? I didn't expect you to actually go. What do you want me to say? That last one hit differently. As if the burden was still mine to make her feel something. As if it was my job to decide the narrative, to do the emotional heavy lifting for the woman who hadn't lifted a finger to save us. But the truth is, I didn't want her to say anything. I wanted her to sit in the silence she built, to taste the exact distance she created. I wanted her to finally feel what it was like to speak and hear nothing back. Later that evening, I stopped by a local diner. A woman behind the counter noticed how long I stared at my coffee and asked if everything was okay. Her name was Ria. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with silver strands in her dark braid and a kindness in her voice that felt unfamiliar. I didn't tell her much, just that I left someone who didn't notice me disappearing. She didn't pry. She just said, "Sometimes people don't appreciate peace until it's gone. But you look like someone who mistook pain for love for too long." I swallowed hard and nodded. She was right. I had confused silence for safety. I had taken being ignored as something I needed to fix, not escape. That night, as I lay down in my unfamiliar bed beside an unfamiliar lake, I didn't check my phone again. Let her wonder. Let her sit with it. 2 days passed. No calls. No texts. The silence had finally returned, but this time, it belonged to me. I drove aimlessly, stopping at quiet gas stations and empty overlooks, feeling more like a shadow than a man. Part of me was still waiting for her to say something real, something that didn't sound like damage control. I knew better, but old habits die slow. Then, just after noon on the third day, she broke the silence. Not with a text, not a call, a voice message. I stared at the notification for 15 minutes before I pressed play. Her voice filled the car, shaky and soft, like someone trying to sound sad without fully feeling it. "Albin, I don't know what you want me to say. I know I've been distant. I know you probably think there's someone else, and maybe there was. But it didn't mean anything. It was just attention, not love. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't feel like myself anymore. I miss how we used to be. I miss the old version of us." She paused. There was a breath. Then she added something that almost made me pull over. "I never thought you'd actually leave." That one sentence nearly undid me. Because there it was, the real truth. She didn't miss me. She missed the convenience of me. She missed knowing I'd always be there, that I'd absorb her moods, her distance, her half-truths, and still ask what she wanted for dinner. What she missed wasn't love, it was control. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Not to hold on to hope, but as a reminder of what settling sounded like. She'd mistaken silence for stability, manipulation for intimacy. And I'd let her. For years. That evening, I returned to the lake. Same spot. Same time. The wind was colder, the surface rougher. I watched the water and thought about all the apologies I'd whispered to her in the dark while she pretended to sleep. Apologies for things I didn't even do, just to keep her from drifting further away. But I finally understood something. I wasn't the one who let go. I was the one who held on until my hands bled. And now, I was finally learning how to let go without saying a single word. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I didn't post, didn't share locations, didn't even keep my phone's GPS on. But somehow she found me. Or maybe she'd been trying to. That afternoon, while I was drinking a watered-down coffee in the motel lobby, she walked in like a stranger who'd taken a wrong turn. Except her eyes locked straight onto me. Cassidy. She looked different. Not ruined or broken. Just smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, like something in her had crumpled in on itself. She didn't say my name. Didn't ask if she could sit. She just lowered herself into the chair across from me and whispered, "I didn't come to fight." I waited. Let the silence answer. "I read your letter," she said, eyes glistening but dry. "I didn't know you were carrying all that." I wanted to scream. Of course she didn't know. I'd been talking to a wall for years while she crafted her own little world inside a phone screen, inside her locked silence. But I didn't scream. I just asked, "Why are you really here?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The way people do when they realize honesty might cost them more than a lie. Because I thought maybe we could fix it. But it was too late for maybe. Too late for fix. And too late to pretend the damage hadn't already reshaped both of us. She had erased me, inch by inch, over years of indifference. And I had finally accepted the blank space she left behind. Before I could answer, Rhea, the woman from the diner, stepped through the lobby door with 2 coffees in hand. She smiled when she saw me, then froze when she noticed Cassidy. The air shifted. Cassidy turned slowly. "Who's she?" I didn't flinch. Someone who asked if I was okay. That's all it took. Cassidy looked at me like she'd seen a ghost, like maybe she was only now realizing I wasn't just hurting, I was healing. And I hadn't done it with threats or revenge. I'd done it quietly. Without her. She stood up without another word and walked out of the lobby. She didn't look back. And this time, neither did I. That night, I sat with Rhea by the lake. No words were needed. She handed me a coffee, and we just watched the water move. For once, I wasn't overthinking, wasn't aching, wasn't spiraling through old arguments or half-truths. I was just, still, present. It struck me how rare that feeling had become, being seen, without needing to explain why I felt invisible. Cassidy didn't try to call again. No more messages. No final pleas or parting shots. She vanished the way I had once hoped she'd never do. And now, I didn't need her to stay. Because the version of me that needed her validation had already gone. In the days that followed, I found myself waking up earlier. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I started walking in the mornings. I bought a used journal and wrote things that had nothing to do with pain. I even smiled when Rhea invited me to her son's little art show in town. Not because I was moving on too fast, but because I had finally stopped standing still. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I had built it. And Cassidy, maybe one day she'll sit alone in that quiet house, listening to the echo of a man she never really listened to. Maybe she'll reach for her phone, scroll past my name, and realize she had all of me, until I had none of me left. But that's her story to carry. Mine is finally light. Thank you for watching this journey unfold here on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever walked away from someone who never noticed you leaving, you're not alone. Before you go, drop a comment below. What's one moment in history where silence changed everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, sometimes, peace begins with goodbye.